And joining us today is Mo Kharbat. He is the vice president. Why don't you tell us what your title is?
VP of Pharmacy Services for SSM Health.
SSM Health for the Wisconsin region, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So if anybody would know a thing or two about FDA approval of medicines and vaccines and things, it would be you, right? So tell us, the big news today is the FDA has given final approval to the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. Can you tell us, from your perspective, what exactly does that mean? It's a thing we hear a lot about, but what does that really mean?
It means two things. It means, number one, that there is now enough data to support the vaccine's claim to be safe and effective, and that the data took enough time to accumulate and study so they can also assess the long-term effects of the vaccine.
So we've had this vaccine now for how long? Since December or so?
Correct.
And that's long enough to offer to come to the conclusion that it's safe without long-term impacts. So how has it been that we've been giving these vaccines to folks for this long period of time without that approval?
It was available under an emergency use authorization. When a vaccine or a drug product meets a number of primary endpoints when it comes to safety and efficacy, but not enough time has gone by yet, but at least the primary endpoints look promising and the vaccine looks safe and effective. If there is an emergency, then the vaccine will be authorized under an emergency use authorization, because when you balance the risks and benefits, you say, well, we want the vaccine to be available sooner than later. We have enough data to go off of while more data is collected and analyzed.
Okay, so we've been giving the vaccine under this emergency use until now. Now we have enough data to say, yes, fully approved 100%. And we now know that without reservation that it is safe and effective.
Correct.
The Pfizer one. Now, are there any further steps now to continue to monitor data?
As with every vaccine, as with every drug product, there is what they call post-marketing surveillance. So after a product is made available, data will continue to be gathered long-term by the company and by the FDA to assess the drug product, or in this case, vaccines effects long-term.
Okay, so this is not just letting it loose in the wild. It's fully approved. We know it's safe. We know it's effective, but we're going to continue to watch and make sure that it remains safe and effective for the long term.
Definitely.
Now, this approval is for Pfizer, the Pfizer vaccine. We know that we've also been getting Moderna, and we've also been getting this Johnson & Johnson product. Are those in a pipeline to get this final approval soon as well?
Yes, it will take more time. The Pfizer vaccine became available first, so it was available to us the longest, and there is enough data now for the FDA to go off of. I believe the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines will follow suit in the next few weeks to a few months.
Oh, that soon? Then we'll be fully okay. So what does that mean for folks? Do you think in your practice, in your day-to-day job as the vice president of pharmacy services, have you seen people who are waiting for this approval? You know what I mean? Like, who are just, I want to get the shot, but I'm just not sure. I just want to see that final stamp of approval.
Yeah. There are some people who told us that, the vaccine seems okay. I know people who took the vaccine. They seem to be doing fine. But still, I won't really take it until it's approved by the FDA. A product that's used under an emergency use authorization, while it seems safe and effective, we need to wait for the full batch of data to come through and for the final approval to be issued. So we expect people now, those of us who were on the fence waiting for this approval, we expect them now to hopefully begin making appointments to get the shot.
Now, is it such a thing? When I got my vaccine earlier in the spring, it was just sort of like, go where you can, get the one that's available. Are we now in a position from a supply perspective that you can actually go and say, I want the Pfizer because that's the one that's fully approved?
Yes, at this point, the supply is good, and we have all three vaccines available to us. So if an individual asks for a specific product, we should be able to honor the request.
Got it. So what would you say to folks who still might be a little bit hesitant, who maybe don't trust the FDA, maybe don't trust the government, maybe don't trust the healthcare system generally, based on historical issues and such? What would you say to folks in that position?
Yeah, this decision is based on data and numbers. It's based on science. It's not really based on anyone's interpretation of whether a product is safe or effective. They go off of the numbers. They assess how many people who received the vaccine ended up getting COVID or not, to be able to establish how effective the vaccine is. So they went through numbers, they went through the data, they applied their scientific standard, to this process. So people should trust this process. It wasn't really influenced by anyone's opinion. It was based on data and numbers.
Do you have any sense? Can you give us just a broad, without getting too granular, what that data says about the Pfizer vaccine specifically? Like we hear 90% effective, 95% effective, and what does that mean exactly?
Yes, so at least 20,000 people who were given the vaccine were followed very closely. And then 12,000 of them were followed for a long time to make sure that the vaccine remained effective and remained safe for a long time. And based on the numbers that the FDA published this morning, the Pfizer vaccine, was found to be 91% effective in preventing COVID. And when it comes to preventing serious illness and hospitalization, the rate was even higher than that. So these are numbers that are consistent with the early statistics that we saw early on, based on which the emergency use authorization was issued. But thankfully, after a few more months and maybe thousands more when it comes to data points, the data remained consistent.
Now, one thing that I noticed in the release this morning, that this is final approval for people 16 and older, right? We still have to monitor the 12 to 15-year-olds for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Right. But that'll be coming in the future, I assume. And then do you have any sense as to when we're going to start talking about vaccinating or getting the emergency use authorization and then ultimately final approval for younger kids? As you know, it's on a lot of our minds as school's starting.
Yeah, definitely. It's a matter of time. So as you mentioned earlier, the Pfizer vaccine became available in December. But it's only in May when the emergency use authorization was amended to include people 12 and up. Right. So they need more data. Since May until now, that's not enough. They need more data, more people who received the vaccine and were followed closely to be able to fully approve the vaccine for 12 and up. We know that Pfizer and Moderna both are studying their vaccine for kids younger than 12 years old. So when this data begins to come in to a level enough to convince the FDA that the body of data is strong enough to suggest that the vaccine will help the younger kids, then it will likely be authorized and then potentially fully approved as well.
Do you have any sense as to how long this approval process normally takes? Is this taking longer than usual? Has it been faster than usual?
No, usually the FDA takes 10 months to a year to review an application for a vaccine or a drug product. But any drug company has the option of requesting a priority review. A priority review means the FDA will need to free up enough resources to come up with a decision within 6 months. And usually they honor a priority review only when the common good outweighs the need for the additional resources and the additional investment. In this case, when there is a national emergency, a global emergency, the vaccine deserved a priority review, and that's what took place.
Got it. Is there any last thing you would say to people as we're struggling through this sort of new surge in cases? Everybody's anxious and scared, and what's the most important thing people should know and can do to keep themselves healthy?
Yeah, the most important thing to know is that the vaccine is safe and effective. Millions of doses were given across the country and across the world. And it shows, the vaccine shows to be effective in preventing serious illness and hospitalizations. And we're seeing outbreaks across the country, but those outbreaks are more commonly seen in communities with low vaccination rates. So the most important thing that you need to do if you haven't received the vaccine is please go and get the vaccine. And in addition to that, until we weather the storm and until the Delta variant goes away, we will also need to practice additional infection control precautions, such as wearing masks in crowded areas, avoiding overly crowded indoor gatherings, and washing hands, and just remaining overly kind of generally careful, I should say, when it comes to infection control.
You mentioned Delta variant, so last question for you. People ask us this a lot: is the vaccine, now that it is fully approved, is it effective against Delta variant, or is Delta variant just that much worse.
Correct. It is effective against the emerging variants, such as the Delta variant, which is now the predominant variant in the United States.
Yeah.
The vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, continues to be effective, showing efficacy at preventing serious illness and hospitalizations resulting from the Delta variant as well.
Mo Kharbat, Vice President of Pharmacy Services, SSM Health, Wisconsin Region. Thank you so much for your time. It's been very helpful.
My pleasure.